Welcome to Disruptive Capitalists, the show where purpose-driven entrepreneurs and bold investors share how they're reshaping the world by investing time and money in a way that improves lives and creates wealth. So let's get to it. All right, welcome back to the show. Today we are joined by a man who didn't just join the venture capital industry when he was quite a bit younger. He decided to re-engineer it from the ground up. My guest today is Michael Collins, the founder and CEO of Alumni Ventures, a firm that has effectively demolished the velvet rope of Silicon Valley and just changed the VC model substantially. So right now, under your leadership, Alumni Ventures has raised over $1.5 billion in capital, built a massive diversified portfolio of over 1,600 companies, which is just incredible, and empowered a community of more than 15,000 individual accredited investors to own a piece of the pie. You guys have been involved in the Grok deal, Lambda, for lots of different things happening, and I'm just really excited to talk to you today, Mike. Thanks for joining the show.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
So years ago, you made a decision, and people can go and watch the videos online about how you got into VC world in the first place. But what I wanted to know was, like, what drove you to really want to upend the VC model and do it differently?
I mean, Sam, it falls into the category of solving a problem that you felt yourself. Right. And this is something that we look for and back a lot, which is, what is the entrepreneur? What is the founder's personal relationship to the problem they're solving? Right. And for me, it was really built around this kind of core conviction that really in a capitalist world, entrepreneurship and building companies and innovation and technology is really the engine that really drives everything. And you can have a long conversation about, the evolution of man from the printing press to the automobile to the computer has really impacted humans more than almost anything. So I'm just a firm believer in the power of innovation and disruption and technology, and investing in it and supporting it. But yet, in my career as an individual, as I kind of floated between being an entrepreneur and being an investor, whenever I wasn't directly at a venture capital firm, I found it incredibly difficult to get access to the quality and quantity of venture deals that I knew in my bones you really needed to have in order to invest in this well. So on one hand, just a huge believer in the asset class. And on the other hand, really structural problems in a person being able to invest in it. So, as most people know, the venture industry, came out of the 50s and 60s, really designed for family offices and institutional money and endowments and pension funds. And that really has persisted for a long, long time. And then there's a bunch of regulatory restrictions about you have to be accredited to invest in a venture deal. Now you can go on Kalshi and you can go to Las Vegas and you can put $100,000 on the Knicks tonight.
Yeah.
But yet you can't invest in an Andreessen startup with your own money. Kind of crazy, but that's the way the world is. And so, I really decided to, spend the rest of my life and career trying to work that problem.
They say desperation's the mother of innovation or invention,
Yeah.
And it's really that pain. I remember like the problem we're solving today originated from when I went to go work at USAID. And one of the first questions I asked at USAID was like, hey, how do you guys track the money? Because I'd been in global health for a while. I'd been on the other end. And their answer was, we don't.
Yeah.
It's like 60 billion a year. You're not tracking that money. Where does it go? And it was just like, we don't have a system to track it. And it turns out that that's really, really a very difficult
That's
problem.
the job of the entrepreneur, right? Is to find the right problem that they want to go spend 10 or 20 years to solve.
That's
And so, because that's what it's really about.
that's what it's really about. And so it's just trying to figure out what we can do to solve these really difficult problems in a very profound way. And it really wasn't until AI came along that we could do things that enable us to accomplish very challenging problems. So how do you see, you talk about a super cycle. Explain what you mean by that.
Yeah, I having started in the business in the, mid 80s, I've seen big technology shifts, right? I tell people here, the kids find it hard to believe, but when I started in venture capital, people didn't really use computers, so the advent of the personal computer, the cloud, the mobile computing revolution, the biotech revolution, these big transformative technologies really reshuffle the deck and create opportunities for disruption, new companies to come along, do things, open up markets, make things more accessible to more people, create value. And obviously, AI is one of those. And from my perspective, it seems to be maybe the largest of my lifetime. It definitely is a disruption that is going faster than other disruptions, other kind of big, profound technology super cycles. I think you're dealing with something that is going to impact kind of every individual, every company, every industry, and frankly, every country. And I think it's happening over, a matter of years, not decades. So I think the world is going to change a lot in the next 5 or 10 years. And, obviously there will be backlash. There always is when there's a big technology change. There will be unintended consequences, good and bad. There will be very local disruption that can be very painful and hard for people who will have to change or have change kind of thrust upon them. But, again, my 40 years in this leads me to believe that, it's coming. You're not going to put the genie back in the bottle. You might hold it at bay. But I also think that we're seeing an unprecedented, listen, the smartest kids in the room, the Googles, the Metas, the Elon Musk, they're all in this game, right? And they all understand it. They're all playing to win. They're all fiercely competing, which is good for everybody. But yeah, it's happening. And wishing it wouldn't isn't going to change it.
Not at all. People often ask, like, Sam, how come you guys did this? Why it should have been Google or it should have been, somebody big, and that's how come they didn't invent it? How come they didn't create it? And you're seeing all these new inventions, these creations come. How would you answer that? And I think we'll go from there to Clayton Christensen, who talked a lot about.
Yeah, I think one of the powers of AI is enormous leverage. So the span of what an individual, a solo entrepreneur, or a small team can accomplish is an order of magnitude, more efficient, faster, more profound. And when you're dealing with an N of one or a very small team, you have the ability to move very fast and innovate and iterate more quickly than a bigger company. And, you see this even within the AI space, Sam. Google, really a generational company, was very early in AI and had really a head start. And a lot of the technology, we're investors in an inference chip company that got sold recently to NVIDIA called Grok. Really, strong background from Google there. But Google also had $1 trillion search business. That it wasn't terribly interested in disrupting itself.
Right.
So it's like it really took OpenAI and kind of the ChatGPT moment for them to kind of, get with it, if you will. And then, they're going to be fine. And they're going to be one of the players standing here for sure. But yeah, this is the story of entrepreneurship. And, one of my mentors and somebody I had a privilege to know pretty well, Clayton Christensen, really articulated and defined that the innovator's dilemma is it makes it just very hard from a systems perspective, from a personal dynamic incentive perspective, human biases, behavioral economics, from all of that bundle of stuff. It becomes very hard for an established company to kind of kill itself off to create the new disruptive thing. So, that when people say, what's the same about AI, what's different, I think that a lot of the fundamental economics and disruption theory holds true. I think the scale and speed and the impact is probably at the far end of the spectrum. When you start innovating human intelligence and human work, which we're starting to get into now with agentic AI, that's big, frankly.
It's big, and I think of, the firms that we're talking with and working with, our partners, or the things that we're doing on the AI side. It's so remarkable compared to what we could do 3 years ago or 2 years ago. And I was speaking with a family office yesterday, and they were saying, hey, there's no such thing as a expert in AI because it changes every day. So there's people who knew about it, what it looked like 5 years ago and 2 years ago and a year ago. It's just who's on top of the market now, who understands how to use it today, and who's going to keep up with it moving forward. And that was their kind of outlook on life.
I think, Sam, there's really two curves. There's a very steep curve, which is the capability, and obviously very simplified. There's the capabilities of AI. And that is a very steep curve, maybe geometric, but it's very steep. And then there's another curve, which is what I'll call kind of the diffusion curve, which is how does it impact the average person, the average company, the average industry? And that is definitely up and to the right, but it's much flatter. And so really the opportunity for investors, for entrepreneurs, for individuals who want to create value for themselves or their companies or their industries is how close can you get to the top curve? And you're never going to be on it. right? It's too hard, it's too fast. But if you can create some separation between the bottom curve, which is, just everybody, and what you can potentially do, I think that's the art. And that's what I drive Alumni Ventures to do. And that's the kind of people we invest in and the companies that we're excited to be a part of, is they're working every day really hard to be at the top of that curve.
You have to be. If not, you're irrelevant in 3 months.
Yeah. No, it's going to be hard for sure. It's, I think it's much better to, but it's hard. Change is hard. Picking up new technologies, new ways of doing things, new workflows. To hear that something you may have spent 5 years studying in school and another 5 years developing pattern recognition and expertise and judgment and taste and conviction about, can now be done almost as well by an agentic AI system.
Yeah.
That's hard to swallow, frankly, for most people. So it's, I get it. I get that that's very hard. I went to school, I went to medical school, I learned to diagnose melanoma, I developed taste, judgment, whatever. And now you're telling me an AI system can do it better than I can. Who wants to hear that? So, I wouldn't.
Yeah. I think we could talk about that space for forever, because it's moving so fast. It's so incredible. I hear people say that there's going to be a bubble. And in my mind, and maybe you can tell me if I'm wrong, but the way that I see the bubble is companies that use AI as a wrapper or to just marginally improve a space, those are the ones who are going to go away. The ones who give me a prompt and I'll give you a result. Nothing in between, just here's the result of your prompt and the thing that you wanted in the first place, then they don't get disrupted. So for example, email, there's, these companies that help you organize your emails. What happens when email's not being used at all? It's one of our techs coming out is it gets rid of email altogether. Or what about, these other things that get rid of they just disrupt these companies altogether. Do you see it differently than that? How do you see it landing for most of these companies coming out?
I think, the issue of what is a sustainable moat in an era of AI is really a very profound question within venture capital and entrepreneurial circles. So I think it is a tough question. I think it is possible. I think things that are very integrated, very complicated from a combination of hardware and software, I think is an interesting space, right? I think when you have to interact directly with the physical world, I think there's moats to be had there. I think there is also some moats you can get around data. I think there are moats that you can get around interfacing with human beings and things that are pretty fundamentally human. I'll give an example of that, which is sports. Humans for thousands of years have enjoyed spectacle, entertainment, and sport, right? If you will. And yes, you could create robots that throw a baseball faster than a human being, or you could create a sport that's that. But I think for a long, long time, on a Sunday afternoon, human beings are going to want to go to football stadiums and watch human beings play football.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
You know, I'm just using that as kind of an extreme example of, there are things about us as human beings that have evolved over a long, long period of time that aren't going to go away. And so, you want to think deeply about moats, I think is really almost the more important question than I have the answer for it. I think I just haven't been around enough to know the unknown unknowns. You just sometimes have to see them play out. But I think when we look at a startup, we're thinking very hard about sustainable advantages that could be built here. And if it's literally just moving stuff around computer screens, I think you have to be very careful and very skeptical. That said, I think you can go too extreme too fast, which, again, this bottom curve of diffusion and adoption, everybody is saying, oh, some of these big SaaS companies are going away. Well, they're not going away overnight. If you're an airline and you have your systems, human and computer, very complicated, built one way to do certain things, you're not going to rip that all out overnight. It may have, Salesforce may not be around in 50 years, but they're surely going to be around in 10. There's just too much. There's too much pain in the ass of you moving your entire customer record systems into a new thing. So, and again, I could be wrong about the time frames on these things, but again, I think the bigger opportunity is about entrepreneurs doing new things, solving new problems, creating value in new ways with very small teams. But it's a very exciting time. I think, Sam, we're entering another golden age of disruption and innovation and value creation. I'm very bullish.
I'm very bullish as well. And thank you for sharing about Clayton Christensen. I was, a disciple of his, but definitely love learning from him, and Jeff Dyer, one of my professors, and Nathan Furr, and these other guys who, just constantly researching and studying disruption, how the little guys break the big guys, the David and Goliath, solving these complicated problems that the big ones just can't solve it because it hurts them to solve it. Why would they?
Yeah.
And that's it. It's not that they aren't intelligent enough. It's just that they're aligned. It's not aligned, right?
No, their existing customers are telling them, give me more of what you've been giving me. And it's usually at higher margin than the startup. And, all the incentives, including a board of directors and a shareholder base that are basically not saying, hey, this is where the world's going to be in 5 years. We have to kind of completely disrupt ourselves. That's good luck with that.
Yeah, not happening. So what? So around the world, one of the things that you've talked about is, really is, exporting that that system, the system that you guys have. You're spreading all over the world. How is your system different than other venture capital firms? And then what are you doing to expand, and why?
Well, I think there's a couple levels of globalization. First of all, I think what I'm going to call the American entrepreneurship system has really proven to be so powerful, the envy of the world. It's called kind of Silicon Valley, but it's, Austin and Boston and New York. It's just created such enormous value that the smart people the world over recognize that that's the way to go. So I think the American kind of entrepreneurial system has been exported. And I think that's good for the world. And, we just, we're in a portfolio company called Replit, which has a Jordanian founder. We're in an international company called Aura with the Aura ring. The fact is great entrepreneurs and great companies are being created everywhere now. That is good. Mm-hmm. That's a good thing.
Yes, right.
And obviously, as a company ourselves that invests in great entrepreneurs, we want to be where the great entrepreneurs are. So, our first decade was really kind of figuring out what we were doing and building the American market. And, our next decade, we really want to be a global network of entrepreneurs and investors and business partners. So we can help an Israeli startup that wants to raise an A round in Silicon Valley, but might want to have business partnerships in Japan. Mm-hmm. That we can facilitate that. So our role in the venture ecosystem is really about connections around networks. I'll also be clear about what we don't do. Mm-hmm. We only co-invest. So we don't lead rounds of financing. We don't go on boards. Mm-hmm. We try to be kind of the co-investor of choice. So we work with all of the top VC firms. We've made hundreds of investments with, the Sequoias, the Andreessens, the Google Ventures, the Benchmarks of the world. They have a very important job. The most important person is the entrepreneur, founder, CEO. The lead investor is the second really important job in that dynamic. We're more like the favorite uncle, right? we leave the company alone, but we really try to be helpful when we can be and when they want our help.
Yeah.
So, we're not the parent. Mm-hmm. So we know our place. We try to be helpful. We have a whole department at the company that just does nothing but try to help our founders when they, have a need. And so a lot of times that's just putting people in touch with people that, might value from working together. So it's very much about connections and networking. And, we would rather that be a global network than just a local network.
Amazes me. It's amazing me how many people think local. And then those of us who have been all over the world have worked all over the world and think just on a completely different, just a different paradigm to think about global engagement, we started out, I remember, we started globally. That's how we started our company, was globally with, location here, Canada, the UK, Europe, and, just started that way. Well, Mike, it has been just a masterclass again. Your insight, incredible. Your experience, incredible. Thank you for being disruptive. I love it. I love, breaking these models of old and showing that there's just better ways to do things and democratize access to stuff.
Yeah, I appreciate the time, Sam, and keep up the good work. We're trying to build stuff. So appreciate the time.
If this episode shifted your thinking, then share it with someone bold. And remember, capital is a tool. Use it to build a world you are proud to live in.